What if I told you that the worst season of your life isn't your downfall, but your initiation? Have you noticed how everything seems to be changing at once? Relationships feel different. Your goals no longer excite you. The person you used to be feels strangely unfamiliar. It almost feels as if life is taking everything away from you. But what if none of this is happening to you? What if it's happening for you? Before a person enters the most meaningful chapter of their life, something strange begins to happen. Reality starts to crack. The floor you once stood on no longer feels solid. The identity you built for years, the one people praised you for, the one you praised yourself for, begins to feel like a costume 2 sizes too small. Most people call this a crisis. Carl Jung called it something else entirely. He called it transformation. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what you're about to hear may explain the exact chaos you're living through right now. And by the end of this video, you will understand something most people never learn until it's too late. That collapse is not the opposite of purpose. Collapse is often the price of it. Let's begin. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when the mask you've worn for years starts to feel heavier than the face beneath it. You wake up one morning and something in you refuses to perform the way it used to. You go through the motions, the job, the relationships, the routines. But underneath, something has gone silent. Something has stopped believing the performance. Jung had a word for that mask. He called it the persona. The persona is not a lie exactly. It's the social armor we build so the world can understand us, categorize us, accept us. It's the version of you that smiles when it's expected, that agrees when it's easier, that plays the role of the responsible one, the strong one, the one who has it all together. For years, this mask serves you. It gets you the job. It keeps the peace at family dinners. It earns approval, and approval, when we are young, feels indistinguishable from love. But here is the quiet tragedy that Jung understood better than almost anyone. The longer you wear a mask, the more you forget it was ever a mask at all. And then, one day, without warning, it stops fitting. You feel it before you can explain it. A conversation that once excited you now feels hollow. A goal you chased for years suddenly feels like someone else's dream, borrowed, inherited, never truly yours. You look at the life you built, and instead of pride, you feel a strange, suffocating disconnection, as if you're watching yourself from outside your own body, wondering how you got here, wondering who this person even is. This is not depression, though it can feel like it. This is not failure, though your mind will try to convince you it is. This is the sound of your persona cracking under the weight of a self that has outgrown it. And I want you to really sit with this next idea, because it will change how you see everything you're going through right now. The death of the false self is not the end of your story. It is the very first page of the one that actually belongs to you. Think about it. Every character you've ever admired in mythology, in film, in the sacred stories passed down for thousands of years, begins their real journey only after their old world collapses. The hero doesn't become the hero while comfortable. The hero becomes the hero in the wreckage. In the moment the ship sinks, the home burns, the certainty disappears. You are not broken. You are being unmade so that something more honest can be built in your place. But here is where most people get trapped. And I need you to listen closely, because this is the part almost nobody tells you. When the persona begins to crumble, the natural instinct is panic. You reach for anything that feels like solid ground. You try to rebuild the old identity exactly as it was. The same relationships, the same routines, the same comfortable numbness, because the unknown feels more terrifying than the pain of staying exactly who you've always been. I want you to notice something as you listen to this. Notice your breathing right now. Notice how for a moment your mind has gone quiet, focused entirely on these words. That quiet, that stillness, is the same quiet that exists underneath the chaos of your life right now, waiting for you to stop resisting it and start listening to it instead. Because the truth is, you cannot think your way out of an identity collapse. You can only walk through it. Jung believed that the psyche has its own intelligence, its own compass. And that intelligence does not care about your comfort. It cares about your wholeness. So when your job no longer fits, when your relationships start to feel foreign, when the goals that once drove you now feel meaningless, understand this. Your unconscious is not attacking you.
It is correcting you. It is stripping away everything that was never truly yours to begin with. so that what remains is undeniably, unmistakably you.
This is the hidden opportunity buried inside every collapse. Not despite the pain, but through it. Now, I want to take you somewhere darker. Somewhere most people avoid, because it is uncomfortable, because it forces you to look at parts of yourself you've spent your entire life trying not to see. As the old identity dissolves, something else begins to stir beneath the surface. Something that has been waiting, patiently, for years, sometimes decades, for the mask to finally slip. Jung called this the shadow. The shadow is everything you've rejected about yourself. Every emotion you were told was unacceptable. The anger you learned to swallow as a child, because expressing it meant punishment. The jealousy you were taught to feel ashamed of. The fear you hid so well that even you forgot it was there. The desires that didn't fit the image you were supposed to project to the world. None of these things disappeared. They simply went underground. And now, as your old identity crumbles, they are rising, unfiltered, uninvited, and often at the worst possible moments. Have you noticed it? A sudden wave of anger over something small. A grief that comes out of nowhere, attached to nothing in particular. A restlessness that makes you want to walk away from everything familiar. A jealousy so sharp it frightens you. This is not you falling apart. This is your shadow finally being seen. And here is something crucial to understand. Something that will change the way you experience every uncomfortable emotion for the rest of your life. The parts of yourself you've spent years pushing down do not vanish simply because you refuse to look at them. They wait. And the longer they wait, the louder they eventually have to become in order to be heard. Picture it like this. Imagine locking a person in a basement and refusing to acknowledge they exist. For a while, silence. But eventually they will pound on the walls. They will scream to be let out. Not because they want to destroy you, but because they simply want to be acknowledged as part of the house. Your shadow behaves the same way. This is why, during periods of transformation, people often feel like they are losing their minds. Emotions they thought they had mastered years ago suddenly resurface with terrifying intensity. Old wounds reopen. Patterns you thought you had outgrown reappear, demanding attention. I want you to consider something that might feel uncomfortable at first, but trust me, it will set something free in you. What if the anger you've been suppressing isn't a flaw to fix, but a messenger to listen to? What if the fear that keeps surfacing isn't there to stop you, but to show you exactly where your old identity is still clinging on, still trying to protect a version of you that no longer needs protecting? Jung's entire philosophy rests on a single, radical idea. You do not become whole by eliminating your darkness. You become whole by integrating it. This means the anger you've been avoiding is not your enemy. It's information. The fear that's been rising is not weakness. It's a map, showing you exactly where healing needs to happen. The jealousy, the confusion, the grief you can't quite explain, these are not signs that something has gone wrong with you. They are signs that something long buried is finally ready to be understood. Let that settle for a moment, because here is what I need you to really absorb, deep beneath the surface of your conscious mind. In that quiet place where real change begins, every emotion you've been trying to outrun has been trying to teach you something. And the moment you stop running, the moment you turn around and actually face what's been chasing you, you discover it was never a monster at all. It was simply the part of you that was never allowed to exist. This is why the unconscious begins demanding change with such intensity during this season of your life. It is not punishing you. It is finally getting your attention, because for years, you were too busy performing to listen. And so the collapse continues. The mask cracks further. The shadow rises higher. And soon, something else begins to happen. Something even more disorienting than the emotional storm itself. You start to feel it in your relationships. Conversations that once felt effortless now feel draining. People you've known for years suddenly feel like strangers wearing familiar faces. And a question begins to whisper itself in the quiet hours of the night. A question that terrifies most people into silence. What if I'm outgrowing the very people I built my life around? We'll go there next. Because what happens after this question arrives is not what you expect. It isn't punishment. It isn't isolation for its own sake. It is something Jung considered absolutely essential to every meaningful transformation in human history. And understanding it will change the way you experience every lonely night that follows. What if I'm outgrowing the very people I built my life around? Sit with that question for a moment, because I promise you, it is not as cruel as it sounds. There is a difference between loneliness and solitude, and almost no one is ever taught what it is. Loneliness is the ache of being unseen. It is standing in a crowded room and feeling invisible, surrounded by people yet starving for connection. Solitude is something entirely different. Solitude is the deliberate act of returning to yourself. It is not the absence of others, it is the presence of you. And during this season of transformation, what you are experiencing is not always loneliness, even though it wears the same mask. Often, it is your psyche gently, insistently, guiding you toward solitude, because it knows something you don't yet consciously understand. It knows that you cannot hear the quiet voice of your true self while you are constantly drowning it out with the noise of other people's expectations. Think about the friendships that once felt effortless. The relationships that used to fill you up now seem to leave you depleted. This is not betrayal. This is not you becoming cold or ungrateful. This is what happens when a person begins to vibrate at a different frequency than the world they built around their old identity. You have not changed because you stopped caring. You have changed because the version of you that needed those particular connections, that needed that particular kind of validation, is no longer the one running the show. Jung believed that individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you actually are, beneath every layer of conditioning, requires periods of profound isolation. Not because isolation is the goal, but because it is the only place noisy enough silence exists to hear your own soul speak without interference. Consider this. Every prophet, every mystic, every visionary who ever changed the course of history first disappeared into the wilderness before they returned transformed. Not because the wilderness was pleasant, not because solitude felt good, but because something essential can only be forged in silence, in absence, in the uncomfortable space where no one is there to tell you who to be. You are in that wilderness right now, and I know it feels unbearable some days. I know there are nights where the silence feels less like peace and more like abandonment. But I want you to notice something as you listen to these words. Notice how, even now in this very moment, something in you is settling. Something in you recognizes this truth. Even if your conscious mind hasn't caught up yet, you are not alone in your solitude. You are finally alone with yourself, perhaps for the first time in years. And that is terrifying, because for most of your life, you have used other people as mirrors, letting their reactions tell you who you are, letting their approval define your worth, letting their presence fill the silence you were too afraid to sit in. But mirrors made of other people are unreliable. They reflect their own fears, their own limitations, their own unfinished business back onto you. And somewhere along the way, you may have started believing their reflection was the truth. Solitude strips all of that away. It removes the mirrors, and for a while, you are left staring into darkness, uncertain, disoriented, wondering if there is anything real underneath all the roles you've played. There is. There has always been something underneath. It has simply been buried beneath decades of performance, waiting patiently for the noise to finally quiet down. This is why every major transformation in human history required withdrawal before it required re-emergence. Not escape, not avoidance. A conscious, sometimes agonizing retreat inward, so that what returns to the world is no longer a fragmented performance, but something whole. So if you are pulling away from certain people right now, if certain places no longer feel like home, if you find yourself craving silence more than connection, understand that this is not a malfunction. This is your psyche protecting the fragile new self, trying to take root beneath the wreckage of the old one. A seed cannot grow in a room full of noise and foot traffic. It needs stillness. It needs darkness. It needs to be left alone long enough to find its own direction before it can survive being seen. Let it have that. Now, I want to be honest with you about something, because this next part is where most people give up, right at the exact moment they are closest to breaking through. Somewhere in the middle of this collapse, fear becomes unbearable, not ordinary fear, something deeper, an identity-level fear. A fear that whispers, What if I tear everything down and there's nothing solid underneath? What if I let go of who I used to be and I become no one at all? This fear is ancient. It is not irrational, even though it feels overwhelming. Your mind is wired for survival, and for your mind, identity is survival. As far as your nervous system is concerned, losing your sense of self is indistinguishable from losing your life. This is why identity collapse can feel so physically unbearable. The racing heart, the sleepless nights, the sense of dread with no clear source. Your body is treating psychological death as if it were literal death. But here is the shift that changes everything. And I want you to really let this land. You do not need to eliminate this fear. You only need to stop fighting it. Trying to suppress fear only strengthens it, because what you resist persists, and what you push away simply waits outside the door, growing louder. But fear observed, without judgment, without the desperate need to make it disappear, begins to lose its grip entirely. It transforms from something that controls you into something you simply notice, the way you might notice weather passing through a sky that remains, underneath it all, unshaken. Try this with me right now. Just for a moment, take a slow breath in, and as you exhale, imagine setting down, just for these next few seconds, the need to have everything figured out. Notice that even without answers, you are still here, still breathing, still whole enough to witness your own unfolding. That is the beginning of something Jung considered essential to the entire process of individuation, the capacity to hold uncertainty without collapsing into it. Confidence, contrary to what you've been taught your entire life, does not come before action. It comes after. You do not need to feel certain to take the next step. You only need to take the next step, and let the certainty arrive later, earned rather than borrowed. This is how you rebuild an identity from the inside out. Not by clinging to an old title, an old role, an old story about who you're supposed to be, but by taking small, honest actions aligned with the truest parts of yourself, even while everything still feels uncertain. Each of those actions becomes a brick, and slowly, without announcement, without fanfare, a new foundation begins to form beneath your feet. One that was not inherited, not performed, not borrowed from anyone else's expectations, but built, deliberately, from the wreckage of everything you had to let go of. And this is where something remarkable begins to happen, something that most people never expect. As you stop fighting the collapse, as you allow the old identity to fully dissolve instead of clawing to keep it alive, the world around you begins to shift in ways that feel almost impossible to explain through logic alone. You'll notice it in small moments at first. A conversation with a stranger that seems to answer a question you never asked out loud. A book falling into your hands at exactly the right time. An opportunity appearing the moment you finally let go of forcing an outcome. Jung had a name for this too. He called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, moments where the outer world seems to mirror the inner transformation taking place inside you. Skeptics will call this chance. But Jung believed something deeper was occurring, that as you align more closely with your authentic self, the barrier between your inner world and outer reality becomes thinner, more permeable, until the two begin, almost imperceptibly, to move in rhythm with each other. This is often one of the clearest signs that you are entering the most important chapter of your life. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because everything finally starts to feel aligned, even the difficulties. You begin trusting a quiet inner knowing over the loud opinions of the outside world. Your intuition, once drowned out by decades of noise, becomes a voice you can finally hear clearly, and more importantly, a voice you finally trust. If your life feels chaotic right now, understand this. Chaos, in the language of the psyche, is not the sign of an ending. It is almost always the sign of a threshold. Nature herself moves this way. Before a seed becomes a tree, it must first break completely apart underground, unrecognizable, invisible, seemingly destroyed. No one standing above the soil would ever guess that the mess beneath their feet is not death, but the very beginning of life. You are not falling apart. You are breaking open. The relationships that fell away were never meant to survive your becoming. The goals that no longer excite you were never truly yours to begin with. The person you used to be was simply a chapter, not the whole story. And the discomfort you feel right now, the uncertainty, the loneliness, the fear, the strange sense of not recognizing your own life anymore, This is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is evidence that something extraordinary is finally being born. So the next time the silence feels unbearable, the next time the fear rises without warning, the next time you catch yourself grieving a version of your life that no longer fits, remember this: you are not being punished. You are being prepared. Somewhere beneath the wreckage, a truer version of you is already taking shape, waiting only for you to stop resisting long enough to let it finally step into the light. This is not your downfall. This was always your initiation.